Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when Hollywood legend Clint Eastwood walks onto The View and faces off against Joy Behar over one of the most divisive questions in America today? Should faith and religion be reintroduced more strongly into family life? What started as a polite conversation turned into one of the most explosive moments daytime television has seen in years. The audience expected light banter about movies and family, but within minutes, sparks flew as Clint Eastwood spoke passionately about the loss of moral grounding in modern homes, while Joy fired back, accusing him of pushing outdated ideals on a changing world. As the tension built, even Whoopi and Sunny tried to calm things down, but nothing could stop what was coming. Clint's quiet intensity clashed with Joy's fiery wit, and what followed was a battle of conviction, values, and raw emotion that left the studio gasping. By the end of the segment, one of them would leave the table, and the other would leave millions of viewers stunned. This is the unforgettable moment when Clint Eastwood confronted The View on the question, should faith and religion be reintroduced more strongly into family life? Stay tuned, because what started as a discussion ended as a reckoning.
The set of The View had a special kind of buzz that morning. The cameras rolled, lights glowed across the table, and the audience clapped as the hosts took their seats. Whoopi Goldberg leaned into her microphone with her usual calm energy. "We've got a Hollywood legend with us today," she announced. "Someone who's been part of American storytelling for more than half a century. Please welcome Clint Eastwood." The crowd erupted into applause. Clint walked in slowly but confidently, wearing his familiar half-smile. At 94, he still carried that rugged poise, the kind that silenced rooms without trying. He shook Whoopi's hand first, then nodded politely to Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and finally to Joy Behar, who greeted him with a teasing smirk. "Well, look who wandered in from the Old West," Joy joked, as the laughter rippled through the audience. Clint chuckled softly. "Just figured I'd see what all the noise was about," he said, his gravelly voice carrying easily across the stage. The mood was warm at first. Whoopi steered the conversation toward Clint's long career, his directing, and his reputation for discipline and endurance. The audience listened closely as he spoke about film, legacy, and growing up during tougher times. But it wasn't long before Whoopi leaned back in her chair and shifted the discussion. "So, Clint," she said, "you've been pretty vocal about the way family values have changed over the years. Today's question is one that stirred up a lot of reactions. Should faith and religion be reintroduced more strongly into family life?" The studio hushed slightly. Clint clasped his hands, thoughtful. He nodded slowly. "I think we've lost something. You don't have to go to church every Sunday, but when I was a kid, there was a sense of grounding. Faith gave families a moral compass. You knew where you stood. You knew what mattered." Joy leaned forward immediately. "But Clint," she said with that trademark spark in her voice, "don't you think people can have morals without religion? I mean, it's 2025. We got science, education, therapy. We've evolved a little, haven't we?" The audience chuckled, sensing the tension brewing. Clint smiled faintly, unfazed. "Sure, you can have good intentions without faith, but there's a difference between knowing what's right and feeling accountable to something higher than yourself. When faith left the home, so did reverence." Sunny nodded slightly, clearly intrigued. "That's an interesting point. You're saying faith created accountability beyond human laws." "Exactly," Clint said. "It's not about rules or fear. It's about remembering we're part of something bigger. When families prayed together, they stayed connected, even when things got tough." Joy crossed her arms. "That sounds lovely, Clint, but for a lot of people, religion didn't connect. It confined, especially women, especially kids who didn't fit the mold. You're talking about the good old days, but not everyone's version of that was so good." The audience murmured. Some clapped softly at Joy's point, others stayed silent, waiting for Clint's response. He looked at her with calm eyes. "You're right," he said evenly. "Religion has been misused, but that's not faith's fault. That's people twisting something sacred for power. You don't throw out the compass because someone used it wrong. You learn to read it again." A wave of quiet applause moved through the studio. Joy's eyebrows lifted slightly. She wasn't used to being on the defensive this early. Whoopi jumped in to balance the tone. "I think what Clint's saying is about values, not doctrine," she offered, "like respect, compassion, forgiveness, all those things families struggle to teach without some foundation." Clint nodded. "Exactly. It's not about preaching, it's about passing down principles. You look at kids today, smart, talented, but many feel lost. That's not because they're bad kids, it's because we stopped giving them a map." Joy smirked, leaning on the table. And that map has to come from religion? Not always, Clint replied, his voice still measured, but faith gives that map shape. It gives purpose. When you teach a child there's something sacred about life, they grow up respecting it. Sunny interjected, curious. Do you think families can bring back that sense of faith without going back to church? Of course, Clint said. It starts at home. A parent sitting with their child saying, there's more to this world than you and me. You can call that religion, spirituality, conscious, whatever word works. The point is, we've stopped having those conversations. The audience clapped again, louder this time. But Joy wasn't finished. She gave a half smile. So, Clint, you think the reason families are falling apart is because we stopped praying? Clint's gaze didn't waver. No, he said slowly, I think families are falling apart because we stopped believing in something, in each other. When faith fades, ego fills the space. That line landed like a punch. The audience gasped softly before breaking into applause. Whoopi tried to keep things light. All right now, you're dropping sermon-level lines on us, Clint. He grinned faintly. Just calling it like I see it. But Joy, though, looked unconvinced. She leaned back and said dryly, well, maybe some of us prefer living without invisible judges in the sky. The audience reacted. Some gasped, others laughed nervously. Clint didn't flinch. That's your choice, Joy. But some people need faith, not because they fear judgment, but because it helps them forgive themselves. That line silenced the room. Even Joy looked momentarily caught off guard. Whoopi sensed the rising tension and clapped her hands. Okay, let's take a quick breath, people, she said with a laugh, because I can tell this conversation's just getting started. The camera zoomed out as the theme music played. The audience was buzzing, half on Joy's side, half nodding along with Clint. The air felt electric. What had started as a calm, nostalgic talk had already become something deeper. And when they came back from commercial, it was clear. The debate was only just getting started.
The View studio felt unusually tense that morning. The topic had already ignited something raw in the audience. And now, as the discussion deepened, it was clear Joy Behar and Clint Eastwood weren't just disagreeing. They were standing on opposite sides of a generational and moral divide. Joy leaned forward, her tone sharpening. Clint, with all due respect, this idea that we need to bring faith back into family life assumes it ever left. Families today are more diverse, different beliefs, different values. Why push religion on kids who might not want it? Clint didn't flinch. His voice was steady, his gaze firm. It's not about forcing anyone. It's about remembering where we came from. Faith gave this country a moral compass. People used to have principles they stood by. Now we trade them for whatever's trending online. The audience murmured, some clapping softly. Joy rolled her eyes. Principles? You mean guilt and fear. A lot of us grew up in homes where religion wasn't uplifting, it was controlling. I don't think anyone misses being told they're a sinner for living their life. Clint's lips twitched almost into a grin. You're confusing faith with dogma. I'm not talking about preaching fire and brimstone. I'm talking about decency, respect. You don't get that from a TikTok clip or a self-help quote. You learn it from something bigger than yourself. Sunny Hostin interjected gently, trying to keep the peace. Clint, are you saying you believe families today have lost their moral center because religion isn't as present? Clint nodded slowly. Exactly. When I was a kid, you sat down for dinner, you said grace, you talked about your day. Families looked out for each other. Now, half of them are looking at screens. We've traded connection for convenience. Joy leaned back, folding her arms. And yet, Clint, those same families were often told who to love, how to dress, and what to think. You can't pretend religion didn't hurt a lot of people. Maybe the new generation is just choosing kindness without the sermon. The audience reacted with a mix of applause and quiet gasps. Clint turned his head toward her, his tone now quieter but cutting. Kindness without accountability turns into chaos. Look around. We've got kids confused about who they are, parents too busy to guide them, and schools afraid to talk about values. That's not progress. That's drift. Joy's brow furrowed. You're blaming young people for trying to live authentically. Maybe the problem isn't that faith is gone. It's that people stopped using it to justify control.
You can have morality without needing a book to tell you right from wrong. Clint's eyes narrowed. And where do you think that sense of right and wrong came from? It didn't fall out of the sky. It was built over generations of faith, of belief, of people who knew they answered to something greater than applause or opinion polls. The studio was silent for a moment. Even Whoopi Goldberg, who had been unusually quiet, watched them like a referee who knew the match was far from over. Joy spoke again, softer now, but with edge. You talk about accountability, Clint, but faith has been used to justify war, discrimination, and shame. If that's our foundation, maybe it's time to rebuild from compassion instead of fear. Clint took a breath, the steel in his eyes softening just slightly. You're right, faith's been abused, but that's not faith's fault. That's people twisting it. You don't throw away medicine because someone overdosed. You learn to use it right. The crowd erupted in applause, a clear divide forming between those siding with Joy's progressive take and those echoing Clint's traditional call. Joy pressed on. You keep saying we lost something, but maybe we just evolved. Maybe families today don't need a Sunday service to find meaning. They find it in how they treat each other. Isn't that what faith was supposed to teach in the first place? Clint leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice low and certain. And yet, how's that working out? Depression, division, broken families. We're connected online but isolated at home. You think evolution means improvement? Not always. A tense pause filled the air. The audience was hanging on every word, sensing that something deeper than politics was playing out. Whoopi Goldberg finally spoke, half joking but with a nervous chuckle. All right, I feel like we're one Bible verse away from someone flipping the table. The audience laughed, the tension easing for a second, but the look between Clint and Joy said this debate was nowhere near finished. Joy smirked, her tone half sarcastic. I'll take compassion and freedom over guilt and obedience any day. Clint replied calmly, and I'll take faith and discipline over chaos dressed up as freedom. The studio erupted again, half cheering, half booing. The debate had gone from conversation to confrontation. The cameras panned over the hosts as the segment break approached, but everyone knew, the moment they came back, sparks were going to fly even higher. Because this wasn't just about religion anymore. It was about what kind of world we want to hand to the next generation, and whether faith still had a seat at that table.
The show returned from the commercial break, but the tension didn't fade. It grew heavier like static before a storm. Clint Eastwood sat still, calm but unshakable. Joy Behar, on the other hand, was visibly restless. Her jaw was tight, her papers slightly crumpled in her hand. It wasn't anger alone, it was conviction colliding with defiance. Whoopi tried to reset the tone. Okay, we're back. We've got a full table and a full topic. Should faith and religion be reintroduced more strongly into family life? Clint, Joy, you both have made strong points. Let's dig into where this actually affects families today. But before Whoopi could redirect, Clint jumped in. You know, Joy, I get it. You think faith's outdated. But look around. Families are falling apart. Kids don't listen to their parents, everyone's too proud to admit they're wrong, and morals change by the week. Maybe a little faith wouldn't hurt. Joy's eyes flashed. Faith isn't the cure for every problem, Clint. It's 2025, not 1955. Families evolve, cultures evolve. Not everyone believes in the same things, and trying to drag religion back into homes can divide families more than unite them. Clint leaned forward slightly, his gravelly voice cutting through her words. Then maybe that's the problem. We stopped believing in anything that lasts. When I was young, you didn't need to question everything to feel enlightened. You trusted your parents, your teachers, your church. You had roots. People today think roots hold them back, but without them they blow away with the wind. A few audience members clapped. The camera cut to Joy, who smiled tightly. Roots are fine, Clint, but what if those roots were toxic for some of us? You talk about faith like it's this pure thing, but it's been used to silence people, especially women and kids. I don't need a preacher to tell me how to treat my family with love. Clint didn't raise his voice, but his stare was sharp. And yet, without that foundation, we've got parents trying to be their kids' best friends instead of raising them.
We've got young people lost, chasing meaning in the wrong places. Faith gave structure. You throw that away, you lose more than sermons. You lose standards. The studio grew tense again. Sarah Haynes stepped in gently. But Clint, don't you think some people find that structure in other ways now, through mindfulness, therapy, community? It's not always about organized religion anymore. Clint nodded respectfully. Sure, Sarah, but what happens when the therapist moves away, or the community disagrees with you? Faith isn't about convenience, it's about constancy. It's about believing in something even when it's not easy. Joy cut in sharper now. Constancy is fine until it turns into control. My problem isn't with belief, it's with people using belief as a weapon. You say it's about family values, but what about families that don't fit your definition? 2 moms, 2 dads, no religion at all? Are they less moral? Clint exhaled slowly, shaking his head. That's not what I said. But when families stop teaching kids about something greater than themselves, God, service, sacrifice, you get entitlement. You get selfishness. You get a country that's forgotten humility. Joy's hand slammed lightly on the table. Or you get a country that finally allows people to think for themselves. Maybe humility comes from empathy, not from fear of divine punishment. The audience gasped. Whoopi looked like she was about to step in, but Clint's tone softened before she could. I'm not talking about punishment, Joy. I'm talking about purpose. You can't raise a generation without giving them something sacred to hold on to. Faith isn't about control, it's about direction. Joy stared at him, her voice lower but still trembling with emotion. I was raised Catholic, Clint. Every night was guilt and confession. And when I finally stopped believing, I felt free for the first time in my life. That freedom made me a better person, not a worse one. I won't go back to believing that fear equals virtue. For a moment, Clint didn't respond. The silence was heavy, respectful, but charged. Finally, he said quietly, then maybe the faith you were given wasn't the faith that was meant to heal you. Because real faith doesn't chain you, it steadies you. It gives you courage when the world turns dark. That line drew a ripple of applause. Even those who disagreed felt the weight of it. Joy looked at him, visibly emotional but refusing to back down. You know what gives me courage, Clint? People. Real people. I don't need heaven to care about my neighbor, I just need heart. Clint nodded once slowly. Then maybe faith and heart aren't as far apart as you think. The room fell silent again. For the first time, the debate wasn't about proving who was right. It was about 2 lives shaped by different roads to meaning. But before anyone could reflect too long, Joy leaned back and said sharply, Still, I'll take conscience over commandments any day. Clint smiled faintly. And I'll take both. The tension had shifted from fiery to philosophical, but no one doubted something was about to give. The audience could feel it. The conversation had gone beyond TV banter. It had become personal, even spiritual. And Joy Behar was just one spark away from losing her composure completely.
The View's studio felt tighter than usual, as if the air itself was watching what would happen next. The audience was quiet. Too quiet. Clint Eastwood sat back in his chair, calm, unbothered. Joy Behar, however, was no longer hiding her frustration. Her eyes darted toward the audience, then back to Clint. Whoopi, sensing the rising temperature, tried to steady the tone. All right, let's keep it respectful. We're talking about faith and family here, not trying to start a holy war. Joy forced a laugh, but it didn't sound like her usual quick wit. It sounded brittle. Well, Whoopi, that's kind of the point, isn't it? Every time someone says, let's bring faith back, it does start a war. Inside families, inside communities. Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice stayed even. No, Joy, it starts accountability. People used to fear God, and that fear wasn't about control, it was about conscience. Now everyone fears being judged online, not by their creator. That's a weak trade. The audience gave a low ooh, the kind that happens when someone crosses from argument into truth. Joy turned to the crowd, shaking her head. You hear that? Fear is not how we build love. Fear is how we build shame.
That's the religion I grew up with. No thanks. Clint leaned forward, elbows on the table, his tone deeper now. You're confusing fear with reverence. You've turned faith into an enemy because people got it wrong. But throwing it out entirely, that's pride, not progress. Joy's jaw tightened. So now I'm prideful for not believing in what you believe? See, Clint, that's exactly the arrogance I'm talking about. It's not enough for you to have faith, you need everyone else to share it, to feel secure. Clint's gaze held steady. I don't need anyone to share it, but I won't apologize for saying it made this country stronger. It gave people moral backbone when times were tough. We've lost that backbone because everyone wants comfort over conviction. The tension in the room thickened. Sarah Haynes tried to intervene gently. Let's not lose sight of the point. Should religion return to family life, or should it be a choice? Joy shot back immediately. It should be a choice, and it is a choice. What Clint wants is nostalgia, not faith. He misses the days when people didn't question authority. Sorry, but questioning is progress. Clint chuckled softly, a dangerous sound, low and knowing. You call it questioning. I call it confusion. People stopped questioning their own hearts, Joy. That's why everything's falling apart. That's when Joy's control finally cracked. She slammed her hand on the table, startling everyone. I'm done, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured about morality by a guy who thinks the 1950s were the golden age. The crowd gasped again. Clint stayed seated, stoic as ever. Then maybe walking away is the only sermon some people ever give. Joy froze, glaring at him. Oh, that's rich, she muttered, then stood up and walked off the set. The studio fell into chaos, producers scrambling, Whoopi trying to smooth things over, and the audience unsure whether to clap or stay silent. Clint remained in his chair, looking out toward the lights. She's got fire, but sometimes even fire forgets what it's burning for. Whoopi exhaled. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. As the lights dimmed, Clint leaned back, unshaken. The clash was over, but the conversation it sparked would be replayed, analyzed, and debated long after the credits rolled.
When The View returned from its abrupt commercial break, the atmosphere felt completely different. The bright studio lights, usually warm and inviting, now cast a harsh glow on the table where Joy Behar's empty chairs sat like an open wound. The audience was whispering, phones already out, recording, tweeting, whispering names and phrases like Joy walked off. Clint Eastwood owned that segment, and this just got real. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the professional, tried to steady the ship. She smiled awkwardly, the kind of smile hosts wear when they're putting out a fire live on air. Okay, she said, hands raised. Things got a little heated. It's a passionate topic and everyone's got their truth. Clint, thanks for sticking around. Clint nodded politely, still calm, his posture almost regal. He said, I don't hold it against her. She's got heart. You just can't have real talk about faith without stirring a few old ghosts. That line landed deep. Even Ana Navarro, who had been mostly silent during the storm, murmured, That's true. Faith means something different for everyone. Some people see it as comfort, some as control. The tension softened a little, but not by much. Viewers could feel that the energy in the room was still unsettled. The debate had gone beyond religion. It had touched the raw nerves of belief, guilt, freedom, and identity. Whoopi Goldberg looked around the table, her voice low and reflective now. You know what I think, Clint? I think faith should help people heal, not hurt. But it's hard to talk about it when it's done both. Clint gave a small, thoughtful nod. That's fair. Maybe that's why we should talk about it more, not less. People are scared of faith because they only remember the worst parts. But there's still good there, something steady in a world that keeps shaking. The audience applauded quietly, not the usual loud daytime cheer, but a respectful kind of clapping that said they understood the weight of what had just happened. Then Clint turned slightly toward Joy's empty seat, his expression softening. You know, he said, I wasn't trying to attack her. I get it. A lot of people were hurt in the name of faith. But if we throw out everything that's been misused, we'll end up with nothing left to believe in at all. That line struck something in the audience. One woman in the front row nodded, tears in her eyes. Another leaned over to her friend and whispered, He's right about that part. Backstage, cameras caught Joy pacing. A producer tried to calm her down, but Joy, ever fiery, just shook her head and said, "I'm not apologizing for having an opinion. He's not the only one who's lived through something." Within minutes, clips of her walk-off hit social media. Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube lit up with takes. Joy Behar storms off The View after Clint Eastwood confrontation. Clint Eastwood destroys Joy Behar in an emotional debate on faith. Faith versus freedom, The View's most intense moment yet. The hashtag #FaithClash on The View trended by afternoon. Fans of both Clint and Joy flooded the internet with divided reactions. Some praised Joy for standing up for personal freedom, while others applauded Clint for defending traditional values. By evening, major entertainment outlets picked up the story. Commentators called it a generational collision and the most authentic TV moment in years. Even rival talk shows played the clip, breaking it down frame by frame. The hand slam, the pause, Clint's line about comfort dressed as freedom, and Joy's final words, "I'm done." But what stood out most wasn't who won, it was what the argument revealed. Two icons from different eras had collided not just over faith, but over what holds families and even the nation together. The next morning, Joy returned to The View. The audience cheered when she walked in. She smiled, still her bold self, and said, "I needed a moment yesterday. But hey, if we can't disagree honestly, what's the point of having a view?" The audience applauded wildly. Whoopi leaned in with a grin. "Now that's the Joy we know." And even though Clint wasn't there, his words from the day before lingered in the public's mind. Faith doesn't chain you, it steadies you. In the end, neither side truly won, but the conversation did. For once, daytime TV had delivered more than headlines. It had reminded millions of viewers that belief, in any form, still matters, and that sometimes the hardest debates are the ones that make us think the most. If you enjoyed this powerful TV moment, don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic celebrity showdowns, emotional debates, and unforgettable clashes that shake daytime television to its core.